Stellar Fundraising Auctions presents Black Tie and Tails. Brought to you by our sponsors Sojourn Ventures and Greater Giving, featuring fundraising auctioneers Greg Quiroga and Devon Bell, and with this episode's special guest, Michelle Holman. Welcome to Black Tie and Tails, our auditory trip into the wonderful world of fundraising auctions where we share tales of triumph and tragedy. I'm your host, Greg Quiroga. This is my co-host, Devon Bell.
Hello, all.
And it's almost time to send the kids back to school, Devo. And so for that, we have a special guest joining us this episode, Michelle Holman with Greater Giving. I've known Michelle since 2004. I was introduced to Michelle back before Greater Giving was Greater Giving. It was Auction Pay, and I met Michelle at the V Foundation event in 2004, back when it was at the Coppola estate, if I recall. So, Michelle Holman, welcome into Black Tie and Tails.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Greg, that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's. I remember when I first started doing this, Dave, who was my mentor, he said he'd been doing it for 20 years. And I was like, I wish I had 20 years experience. I wish I'd started doing this 20 years ago, not putting it in my head that if he had 20 years experience, he started around just a couple years before I did in terms of life experience. And now suddenly 20 years later, and I'm like, I wish I was 30 again.
Right. That went quick.
That went super fast. And we were reminiscing also, Michelle, talking about like how much when we met, my wife was not yet pregnant, and your kids were young.
My kids were, my twins, Jake and Jess, were 11, right?
Okay.
Because they just turned 30. Wow. Then Emily was 5. 6, maybe.
So you got the double-edged sword of being through an entire elementary school of school fundraising with the twins, and then starting over with your daughter in kindergarten again. You've seen some fundraising shit. I'm gonna guess.
I have, and of course, as you know, I got tagged, which I wanted to be tagged,
right?
To be the auction chair.
Oh yeah.
The nice thing is that most often when I was the auction chair, I also got to do it with my best friend. Oh. So it worked out well. She also has twins, and so we were partners in crime, but we just worked really well together. And I think that was one of the keys to our success, is that she was a shopper. I'm not a shopper. She procured because they couldn't say no to her, and they could easily say no to me because I don't like to shop. So just find your happy mix with your auction chair and your committee, and lifelong friends. That's the time, lifelong friends.
That's awesome. And I can definitely say, like, Michelle, my wife, Michelle, and I got tagged to be on the committee starting in preschool, because they're like, oh, you're on. And what always was entertaining was that there are some parents for whom solicitation is a blood sport. And they would just go out and they just thrived on going out and acquiring stuff. And I always appreciated those parents, whether it was for our kids' school or as the auctioneer, because they certainly make the auction better and make our lives easier.
They're squeaky wheels. They won't take no for an answer.
Absolutely.
It becomes a game for them.
Right.
Absolutely. So I know you've got a ton of stories from the career side of things, but we don't want to out any of your clients or anything. So what's the from the mom side of the auction paddle side, from the mom side of the aisle? Like, what story jumps out for you? Like what? Well,
one that I'll never forget, and it was client / my own school auction. We had our key to our success was just making sure our parents had a lot of fun. So we always had a band. We always made sure that we had a signature drink. Everybody had a great time. So along with that came a bit of trouble one year where we were at a golf club, and I had no idea. I was busy doing the auction. No idea. I thought the event went great. We raised a lot of money. Everybody had a good time. Till about literally 2 months later, I was at the same golf club for another event. And the person running the event pulled me aside, or she was actually running the golf club, said, so she goes, we never told you this, but we think you should know.
Oh, that's always that's always a precursor for like oh, by the way, this happened months ago, but you still need to know about it is never a good word.
The story that starts with "we think you should know" is usually not a good story.
I know, especially when it involves your kids, but in this case, it didn't. It involved the parents. What they did was this golf club's on top of the hill and in a very nice area. Anyway, they stole the golf carts and and went on just fun rides down the hills and all over the place. And they did get in trouble, not in big trouble, but they did get in trouble. No idea, no clue that happened, no clue that was going on during our event. So, yes, the message is just make sure that they're having a good time, but make sure they stay inside and dance versus go outside and get themselves into trouble.
Well, I mean, it's funny because schools are some of the wildest organizations with which we work. Parents,
They are.
when parents get together, Devon has said this numerous times on the podcast. When parents get together, they cut loose harder. They've got the sitter.
Right. Everyone's dressed up, drinking alcohol. They spent months seeing each other for 5 minutes at drop off and saying, we should hang out sometime. And here it is, right? There's some built up energy there for sure.
Yeah, they're the wildest, hardest partying crowds. I have often blown away by to the lengths to which parents will go. So stealing the golf carts and joyriding. I mean,
right.
At least it sounds like they kept their clothes on.
Pretty sure I would have heard about it if not, because it was already a good story. So they would have just embellished. But you're in the battlefield together with your kids, right? Through sports and all sorts of activities. So when you do get together and there's opportunity to have fun, there's music, competition with bidding, all of that.
Signature cocktail.
Right.
Signature cocktail, but that mix really is your key to your success.
It is. And crowds, the school crowds, thankfully come in with a lot of pre-built motivation, right? Everybody wants to support their kids' school and be part of it, at least for the first 6 years, right? Like you've got them K through 5, and after that, they're like, well, how much more art do you want me to buy?
Right. My fridge is covered.
Yeah, my fridge is covered, but you've got the built-in motivation is the good balance for the wildness and partying and cutting loose.
We talk about how what we trade on and what is often the most priceless is people, right? And human relationships and friendships, because we can all buy things online. And some of the places where you see that the strongest is at a school where parents are friends for many, many years and they're connected by their children. And there's a real chance to trade on social relationships. Exactly.
And I think that even with considering table assignments, if you give them the option to sit together, and at least at our event, that just brings on more fun, more competition. And there's so many things you could do. There was one. Can I throw in an idea here, Greg?
Yeah, sure, go for it. We love ideas.
So it was not my school, it wasn't my idea, but most of my ideas are taken from other people out there. But it was a school auction, so everybody knew each other, and they had a love boat theme. So I'm dating myself, but whole Julie and love boat. So the auctioneer was on the stage, the bartender was in the back of the room.
Isaac.
And he was doing the live auction, and he interrupted. And I can't remember the guy's name that was kind of the goofy guy on the love boat.
Gopher.
Interrupted, and he said, because I have all these extra drinks. And so it was a tray of 10 drinks. They were fun drinks. They were umbrella drinks, and they were like pinks and blues. And so we had this one auction lot was called This Round's on Me.
Oh, nice.
And so what the auctioneer did was he auctioned off that tray of drinks, and either you could buy it for your table, or you could buy it for another table. And it went for well over $1,000. And so of course, the bartender went back, bought another tray of drinks, gave it to the second one. But it was fun because you could buy drinks for your neighbors next door, right? Your friends next door that didn't get to sit with you. And it only works if people know each other in the room. Because we did try it one other time. It was a complete flop. I ended up with 10 martinis. No one on my table drank. So you have to make sure.
A lot of stemware.
You have to make sure that it's that type of event. But it was very fun. It was called, it was This Round on Me.
Right. Nice. Nice.
Very fun.
That reminds me of a story, but let me hit our first sponsor hit, which and it fits right in because Black Tie and Tails is brought to you by our partner, Greater Giving. Transform your nonprofit's fundraising initiatives with Greater Giving, a global payments company delivering unparalleled support for nonprofits and schools for over 2 decades. And Michelle and I can personally attest to that. From effortless event organization to volunteer empowerment and increased donations, Greater Giving's integrated solutions pave the way for success. You can explore Greater Giving's offerings and access a wealth of educational materials online at greatergiving.com. So I totally appreciate that story. And the buy a cocktail for another table reminds me of a quick story, because I don't want to ride too hard on yours, Devon, override yours too hard. But I was doing a school event in San Francisco, a religious school, right? And religious schools, like you talk about the schools that party the hardest, those religious schools, they party pretty freaking hard. And the lot was a mankini, right? Because the Bond film had just come out, right?
Okay.
Body waxing for a guy, and a couple of other things. And you bought it for another guy, right? You were buying it for some other person. And when the bidding got going, right, and there was a few other jokey things to it. I'd forgotten about this. I would have looked it up to see exactly what it was, because I have the exact script somewhere. But and maybe I'll do that and list it on the actual YouTube video later. But you were buying it for another guy, and at a certain point, I asked everybody, because there was a space on their paddle and a Sharpie on their table, to write on their paddle who they were bidding on it for, right? So the bidding gets going, and we get down, and there's like 5 or 6 people who are bidding on this thing. I said, okay, wait, stop, write who you're bidding it for. And that changed the room, right? Because all of a sudden and what's funny is that the guy who bought it gave it to the head of school.
I was thinking, when you see your name on the paddle, you bid against it, so it isn't you. Exactly. But Devon, that one was fun. That one was good, and that's one of those things where when the event chair proposes it, you're like, really? Okay, we'll get, and then you're like, oh wow, this actually worked, and now I'll add this to my quiver of my arsenal of ideas, because that one actually. But again, school, that only works where the people know each other, right? Right.
Cool.
You can only buy a mankini and a body wax for somebody you know.
And love.
Botox, that might not go over well for some women.
Right. Right.
Are you saying I need Botox?
Oh, so Devon, you said you had one.
Sure. Well, I'm going to just kind of throw out some musings about school that I'm sure we've all seen, and then one particular part about school. So, like we've all just been talking about, schools come with benefits and they come with extra challenges. And your point's really taken about how hard they party. And you know how that often happens in conjunction with the live program being run by teachers and school administrators who are very used to being listened to and don't like noises. And I can't tell you how many times that I'm like, that there's this kind of this ongoing shushing, like unsuccessful shushing, and next, focus clap too, and turning the lights on and off, and right, they're used to having second graders listen to them. So partying adults can be funny. Another thing that I think we've all seen is that the trading on social relationships part, right? The doing the same buy-in party every year, and instead of it getting old and everyone who wanted to do it has already done it, everyone runs to get their name on the list, or everyone throws up their paddle because there's FOMO and people don't want to miss out on so-and-so's great party that they throw every year. So there's a lot of things, it's a good to take the close social relationships and kind of special social relationships built around children, built around years of being friends, not just connected through this event, but connected outside of it as well. That comes with its own set of things. Like another example that I was thinking about that is, how sometimes it can be difficult after the event to fulfill it, to get it to the person, or the person disappears and they hadn't paid, and that kind of thing. When it's a school, you don't have to really worry if all the information can get there, because we'll see them Monday morning at drop off, right? No one's running, no one can hide, no one runs away. But one that I thought of specifically was because we all know that golden rule of a buy-in, which is you can't work out the date later.
Right.
You got to say when the date is, and then everyone's bidding on it with the knowledge that that's when the date is and that's when it is. So I was doing a school, and one of the parents, one of the sets of parents owned a restaurant, a local restaurant that was very popular, and they were going to do a real special dinner and it was only 4 couples.
Great. 8 people.
And so they're a small school. Everyone's real tight. The restaurant owner is one of the parents, and they talked me into breaking that cardinal rule of you got to work out the date before you sell it.
What could possibly go wrong?
Correct, sir. And so they told me right up until the auction started, I was saying, so when's the date? When's the date?
Right.
And finally, it was time for the auction to go, and they go, don't worry about it. We all know each other. We'll work it out. So the 4 couples who won it, and they won it, and great. That's that, right? And it wasn't till the next year at the event that when we were doing the consulting and we were talking about it, and I said, oh, and how did that dinner go? And they all got clouds on their faces and went, oh yeah, well, working out the date for that did not go well, and it actually strained some friendships pretty hard. So yes, it's very much a blessing that the people know each other and want to hang out and party together, but maybe even with that in there, there's still some truisms, there's still some.
I like to say there are exceptions to every rule in the world of fundraising, but that's not one of them.
Maybe that's not one of them. That's not one of them. Right. I agree.
If there's going to be more than one person with the same vested interest in a buy-a spot, then asking to herd that many cats with the same vested interest after the fact that's just. And one more thing that you touched on that I think is really true is like a classroom art project. If it's their kid's first year at the school, that's a precious thing, and they want it, and there's bidding galore for that, right? Because my little kids like artwork. But if they've been at that school for 5-6 years, they got one foot out the door and they're not interested. So I always tell the parents, like, listen, as you move on through your school career, classroom art projects get less and less valuable, to the point where if it's their last year at the school, it has no value whatsoever and no one will bid on it. There's a school I work with.
Experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a school I work with that they have K through 5 art projects in their auction, but only K through 2. So kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade are the only ones in the live auction.
Yes.
3rd, 4th, and 5th go in the silent.
Right. You get what you get.
Right. Because they know after 2nd grade. Right. It's not. Reminds me of another story, but let me hit our next sponsor hit. Black Tie and Tails is also brought to you by our partners Sojourn Ventures. When your auction is in need of some international travel, check out Sojourn Ventures. Sojourn creates trips to Italy, Bali, Spain, and now Venice. They just added Venice to their list of consignment auctions that are available.
I'm in.
They offer over a dozen curated packages that include round-trip airport transfers, full body massages, daily breakfasts, in-home chefs, dinners, and more. Your buyers will enjoy top-level concierge service, 2 full years to redeem their trip, all at reasonable consignment prices. Check out sojournventurestravel.com or look for the link in the bio of this podcast. And so that reminds me, the first time I worked at the school in 2005 that introduced me to buy-in parties, and I'd never seen them before. 2005 was the first time I'd seen buy-in parties, and they did. They had a huge set of sign-up parties in the silent auction, like 20 or 30 sign-ups in the silent. I mean, their crowd really likes to hang out together. And they did a 32 lot live auction, and 16 of those were buy-ins, which, I mean, you said it when we were talking about this earlier, Michelle, that's a lot of buy-ins.
It is. Yeah.
And when
everyone in the crowd's going to have to win multiple things that night.
Yeah, you're buying something, because I mean it's also what was it, K through 8, I believe the school was, but really K through 5 is who you're leaning on, and the crowd of 200 people, so that's 100 couples. If you've got 16 buy-ins and they're ranging from 3 couples to 16 or even 20 couples, I mean, you're looking at like hundreds of spots available in your live auction, which is more than there are people in the room.
Yeah.
And I'll be really honest, like when they first told me about the concept, I hated it. It sounded horrible to me. And in the years since then, I've come to recognize and acknowledge that it was something different and something strange and out of my comfort zone. And so fear is a totally rational, or maybe not so rational, like fear is by definition not rational, but it's an understandable reaction to a new situation. And so I was pushing on, look, what you need are better experiences for the lone bidder. What you need are better trips. And they did. They came through with a couple of really good trips that first year. And over the course of the first 2 years working with them, trips went from selling for $2,000 max to $3,200, right? Not bad. We made a jump. And their overall take was way up with me. But I'm meeting with the auction chair to start planning for the third year. And she says, I'm saying to her, like, look, we got to do this and we got to do that. And she's like, Greg, stop. No. Stop trying to make our auction into something it's not. Our crowd loves the buy-in parties. They want to be, and this was direct quote, nobody in our crowd wants to be a tall poppy alone, but they'll be tall poppies together. And yes, the winner take all lots, the trips have only gone from 2,000 to 3,000. She's like, but before we started working with you, the maximum a buy-in ever sold for was $550 per spot. She's like, and last year, that trip to Tahoe for 9 women for the weekend sold for $2,000 per spot. She's like, it's all way up. She's like, so stop trying to change our auction into something it's not and recognize our crowd for what they are and who they want to be. And it was an eye-opening moment for me. I was like, wow, that was when I learned yes, there are rules and there's exceptions for the rules. And what's the most important thing about working with any organization is to meet them where their crowd lives, to find out, I tell people, look, what my goal is to help you plan an auction that is going to represent the culture of your event and crowd to its maximum potential.
I say all the time, I'm going to show you best practices that I've seen because I've done hundreds of these, but it's your event. Yeah. And your event has its own style and its own flavor. Yeah. And let's lean into that.
Yeah. And after that, I embraced buy-ins. I mean, ever since then, this was 2008 was the year that she really leaned into me. It was like, no, our crowd loves buy-ins and stop trying to change our event. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I started leaning into buy-ins more and like, okay, well, what I need to do then is get over my own stuff and start finding some techniques and strategies for how do I make these buy-ins work. And, since then, I've become a huge proponent of buy-ins. I actually did a buy-in once. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the way a buy-in works is there's a set number of spots, a fixed date.
Sometimes 10 couples means 10 couples, and sometimes 10 couples means 10, but we could take 12.
Right. And then if there's few enough spots, and the example I use is from the first year I worked with that school, there was a couple, Peg and Tim, and Peg made a mean Coca-Cola braised beef, and Tim had a huge wine cellar, and it was for 3 couples to go to their house for dinner on a set date. And you start the bidding who wants to go to their house at $150 per couple, and look, there's more than 3 hands in the air, so now the price goes up, $175 per couple, $250 per 3, and eventually that sold for $650 per couple. There's only 3 hands in the air, right? The price can go up. So over the course of the years, I've developed strategies and tactics for how best to manage that process. I did a buy-in for a 700-person event, at a 700-person event for 65 couples to attend a margarita party, Cinco de Mayo party, backyard on the peninsula in the Bay Area, beautiful home. And right before the auction's about to start, the donor comes up to me and she says, I cannot believe you have the opening bid on my buy-in set at $175 per couple. That's far too low. This needs to sell for $550 per couple or I'm not doing it. Ugh. And it's like, oh, okay. I wish we'd had this conversation before, but here we are. Okay. So 65 couples. I say, who wants to go at $175 per couple? And there's hundreds of hands in the air. So thankfully, I start running the numbers, and at a certain point, a dad jumps up and says, this is bullshit. There's not that many hands in the air. And I'm like, oh. And normally I try to be nothing but positive energy on stage, nothing but supportive of people. But as soon as you accuse me of being a charlatan, then the kid gloves come off. And I was like, no, come here. And I got him to come stand on stage. I said, count with me. And so we counted, and like 50, 60, 65, 70. Are we over 65 yet? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, go sit down. And the price kept going up. And we actually sold that for $650 per couple, and oversold it. But it's not a recommended way. Like if you've got a buy-in and the donor wants a really high price, then just set it at that price. Don't rely on the crowd's willingness, especially when it's that many couples.
I want to touch on the actual logistics of doing a buy-in, because that kind of ties into it, what he just said. The actual logistics of selling a buy-in are nightmarish. They're nightmarish because people aren't paying attention and partying. You can't tell them enough times and train them. Keep your paddle up. If your damn paddle is not up, you are not in. And then no matter what you do, people put their paddle down. I talk to the spotters beforehand and tell them, listen, you got to tell people, keep your paddle up, because when I freeze it, I freeze it. And is it not, you've both seen this, is it not a universal truism that you go, okay, we have our couples, that's it, freeze it right there. And out of the corner of your eye, you see somebody put their paddle up and like, okay, you are late, I'm not going with you. You'll have the people who their paddle wasn't up at 500, but it is up at 700. Are you even paying attention to what we're doing here? So that's why nightmarish.
One of my strategies, and I'm hesitant to put this out there in the world, but I know that not that many people who actually bid on our auctions are watching this podcast, so that's all good. One of my strategies for doing a buy-in is to run it to where we actually only have 80% of the hands.
Yes.
So if there's 20 spots, run it till there's 16 hands in the air, knowing that that extra 25% are going to throw their hands up after the price is set. Because some people don't want to feel like they're being taken advantage of, and as soon as they know the price, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good, and they raise their hand, and you're like, okay, I see you coming. And so now and a couple of times in the last 17 years, that's bit me,
Oh, because you didn't have enough. Well, another thing you can do is in the consulting, set expectations and say, if we don't sell all the spots, you can sell some, you can figure out how to get them sold later. Yeah.
And the line that I'm sure you use is the line that I use is like, well, if anybody else wants to purchase a ticket to this event between now and the end of the night, please, let our crew know at registration and check-in.
From Greater Giving.
Yeah, exactly. And if you, come to your senses after the event, I have we're going to sell this out between now and September 5th. I have no doubts about that, or whatever the date is, right? Like, we're good. School events, so much fun. So much fun. So we always try to wrap up, Michelle, with some takeaways to talk about, like, what are some of the things that what have we learned? What is there a moral? Are there any morals to the story? And I think one of the takeaways is to lean into the community, right? Like to school or otherwise, right? Like, this isn't just about school auctions. Any organization has a unique community at their event. So to lean into that and to make sure that the event you're creating and crafting reflects that, as opposed to, and you can try to create it, but you can't swim against it, right? Like, if your crowd is not into hanging out with each other and it's a bunch of people who don't want to do buy-ins, and don't do buy-ins, right? But if your crowd loves each other, then go for it. What
do you think about buy-in? So you're buying, the way that you're doing a buy-in live, that's where you make the most amount of money. One of the questions I get from a lot of my clients is, how do we have something for everybody? And so there's going to be people there that perhaps couldn't afford that $550 a couple, those types of things. So we call them count me in parties.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we did something a little different. And I know that you've seen this because you actually gave me this idea years and years ago, Greg, where there was poster boards, and there was themes for the poster boards for the parties. And you actually said that people would stand near dressed as the theme. Yep. So like the Iron Chef party, or cooking class party, or something along those lines. But I think one of the most fun for our school is called the Break the Rules Night.
Okay.
So when my kids are in school, things are a little different. We had like kindergarten, first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth. So fifth, sixth got to participate in Break the Rules Night. And so it was kind of all the extras that you procure, like all the pizza gift cards and all that great stuff. And then on a Friday after school, the teachers actually put this on, only for a couple hours, but the kids got to go and to the hallways, eat in the teacher lounge. I mean, do everything that was legal they could do.
Right.
Spit and fight. But
water balloon fight. Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, $40 a child. But
awesome.
And then if a child doesn't invite, everybody was invited. We went to the teacher's discretionary fund and paid for everybody to come.
Nice.
But then every single year, the kids in 5th grade, they're like, get to do this. We get to go to break the rules night. So it became a tradition year after year.
Nice.
That's great.
So something for everybody is there a certain number of people that are going to bring in the larger dollars, and we rely on them, right. To keep the school going. But these are more, this level, more of community builders, making new friends. And I always encourage them to find somebody for the kindergarten class and a parent that's going to do that party first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, because you typically hang out with your children's age range. And then those parties sold out every year.
Yep.
It was just the key to their success was making sure there was something at every range.
Well, that's great. That's so. Summarizing takeaways so far: lean into the community, offer something for everybody.
Yep.
Also create a sense of tradition. What I heard in what you said was that there was a real sense of tradition, that kids look forward to the opportunity to do that again. And you see it with the parents as well. Like, oh, I want the parking spot this year, right? So to create a sense of tradition. And you also see it at other organizations and events. I mean, with kids in schools, it's great, but with other organizations, like, oh, this year we're going to get the champagne to open. Yeah. This year we're going to get the trip to Bali, or whatever it is. Right. Yeah.
And I think it was spot on when you talked about having something that people can bid on, that everyone can bid on. The price isn't going to go up.
Right.
I often will recommend some kind of buy-in where, hey, you're going to do a big feast. You're going to have some kind of, get a band or some kind of entertainment. And there isn't X number of couples. It's everyone who wants to come can come. And you said $40 a head, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
There's going to be some people in your crowd where the entry fee to get, the fee to be at the party, and then being at that party is the only money you're going to get from them. And maybe from an X's and O's standpoint, it's not so much money, but it's crucial from a community, egalitarian, we're all in this together standpoint.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially with schools.
Yeah.
You want to make sure everybody's included, because you want those parents to make friends with the other parents.
Yeah.
Right.
And feel welcome.
That's great.
So that's one of the ways that work for us.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Michelle, I appreciate you stopping by and sharing your expertise and hanging out with us. It's always a pleasure. Any parting thoughts that you would like to send our way?
Oh, heavens. I was trying to think of something that one of the mistakes that I personally have made, it was kind of like one of those, are you kidding? You really did that? So I'm just going to leave you with this. So with a school, one of the things that I think is a great idea is to do what's called a volunteer trade. So registration, you have
right.
Yeah, so you have like the neighboring school come do registration for you.
Right.
So your parents can enjoy their event. As it cuts down on the visiting and registration, it just gets them in, gets them out.
Yep.
They're overbidding.
Love it.
So one year we had the same parents come every single year, and they were so kind, and they would do registration and data entry. So they said, we never get to enjoy ourselves. And so on my way literally out the door, I grabbed 4 bottles of wine. I went over and said, thank you very much. I handed them each a bottle of wine. What I didn't say, and I know better, is save the celebrating till the end of the night.
Oh, no.
Pop goes the wine, right?
Oh, no.
I have got like the 10,000 piece puzzle on my hand afterward. Do the entry, but it's just one of those things like, I knew better. I knew what I should have said, that just live and learn with everything, right?
Yes. Thank your volunteers.
Best checkout ever.
Right.
Where'd they go?
Thank your volunteers in a way that encourages them to finish their volunteer shift.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for having me, you two. It's nice to see you again and participate. This was fun.
Absolutely. Well, always appreciate you and always appreciate Greater Giving. And thank you, listener, for joining us for this episode of Black Tie and Tales. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast distribution channels.
Yep. Thank you once again. And thank you, Michelle. Great times.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care.